So I've told this story before about one of my sheroes, Wangari Maathai. How many of you remember me mentioning her or even know who she is? A few of you, like I saw the few hands last time I mentioned her. So since not all of you remember her, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. Wangari Maathai was born in a small village in Kenya in 1940. She was the first woman in Kenya to achieve a PhD. And in 2004, she was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize for her contribution to sustainable development, democracy, and peace. In 1977, she founded the Green Belt movement that, to date, has planted over 51 million trees in Kenya. 51 million trees. That's a lot of trees. Now, you might ask, why would she be focused on planting trees? Well, when she was a little girl in Kenya, missionaries came to her town, her village, more a village than a town. And when they saw that the community was gathering under the trees, they didn't understand what was going on. They thought that the people were worshiping the trees. So the missionaries did what they thought was right. They cut down all the trees. Well, what the missionaries didn't understand was that by cutting down all the trees, when the rainy season came, there was no deep roots or trees to hold the soil in place. And so mudslides and landslides desecrated and destroyed villages throughout Kenya and in Wangari's community. Now, that cutting down of trees seemed the solution to the missionaries' perceived concern, but in fact, it had an immediate and long-term consequences. And that's why Wangari Maathai started the Green Belt movement. Sometimes decisions that are made are not considering the long-term consequences. And unfortunately, humanity continues to destroy forests and the land, and that has grave consequences for climate change, rainfall, and air quality. The Amazon forest is the largest tropical forest on the earth, with the highest density of plants and animal species anywhere. It spans 9 South American countries and 2.5 million square miles. In other words, roughly the size of the contiguous 48 states of the United States. And the Amazon represents over half the world's remaining rainforest. It's home to 120 indigenous groups, including remote tribes that have not made contact with modern civilization. This region provides essential ecological services. It stabilizes the world's rainfall patterns and stores massive amounts of carbon that mitigate climate change. Additionally, the vegetation in that region takes in massive amounts of carbon dioxide, which helps in our climate change. Currently, the Amazon forests holds 100 billion tons of carbon in the cell walls of trees. 100 billion tons of carbon. And it circulates 20% of the world's oxygen. And yet, humans have deforested 20% of the Amazon in the last 40 years. And an additional 20% is at risk of being destroyed. All for agricultural expansion, which is the greatest threat to this ecosystem. Industrial farming, urban expansion, mining, petroleum extraction, dams, and irresponsible timber production have led to massive forest loss. And as this deforestation continues, the effects of climate change intensify, and we run the risk of losing this spectacular ecosystem for future generations. Deforestation skyrocketed within the first 4 months of 2020 in the Amazon, increasing by 59% compared to the same period last year. 60% increase in deforestation. Between January and April, nearly 3,200 acres were deforested, equivalent to 1,800 soccer fields. 1,800 soccer fields compared to the same period in 2019. In 4 months, that amount of land that was cleared in 2019 was cleared in the Amazon forest. As the Brazilian government retaliates against employees committed to protecting the forest, and cutting back on efforts to fight environmental crimes, the COVID outbreak happened, but yet the deforestation is expected to surge in the second quarter of the year. So we think, well, the Amazon forest, that's not really anything that we are concerned with because it's not in our country. And yet in the United States, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which is located in the northeast corner of Alaska, is one of the finest examples of wilderness remaining anywhere in the world in addition to the Amazon forest. It is a perfect example of intact, naturally functioning Arctic and subarctic ecosystems, consisting of more than 19 million acres and the largest national wildlife refuge in the country. You may have heard that the current administration has opened up this wildlife refuge for drilling. And last month, environmental groups filed a lawsuit in federal court challenging this decision to allow gas and oil leasing in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. This is going to cause irreparable damage to one of the most important wild places and takes America in exactly the wrong direction in combating climate change, the lawsuit says. And then there are the wildfires in Australia and California and other parts of the world. In 2001, a team of international scientists projected that during the next 100 years, we're already in the first 20 of that 100 years, our planet would witness higher maximum temperatures, more hot days and heat waves, and the increased waves of forest fires, which substantially degrade air quality, especially in metropolitan areas, as a result of this climate change. In the past month, heat records were busted across California. More than 3 million acres of land is burning, and in major metropolitan areas such as Los Angeles and San Francisco, air pollution has skyrocketed. California is being pushed to extremes, and so is the rest of our world. Record heat, fires, pollution have one thing in common. They were made worse by climate change. This convergence is perhaps the strongest signal that calamity climate change scientists have warned. For years, it wasn't far off in the future, but it is here today and can no longer be ignored. With all that is happening in our world today, it's easy to feel helpless. I've just given you a lot of statistics, a lot of information, and you may be sitting here thinking, well, all right, but that's California, that's the Amazon, that's Arctic wildlife. What can I do? How can I make a difference? At least I hope you're thinking, what can I do? How can I make a difference? And I want us to follow the example of Wangari Maathai. We can't probably by ourselves plant 51 million trees, but we could plant one, or maybe we could add some flowers or gardens to our property if we have them, or put a plant out on our porch. But there's something that we can do to reduce our carbon footprint, to eliminate plastic usage, to donate to causes and sign petitions. I have to tell you that I sign a lot of petitions on the internet, and I, as a result, get hundreds of emails every day from all of these various groups, but I still feel like my voice, my signing matters. I shouldn't say signing like I'm signing my handwriting, I just press a button now, but it does matter, and it makes me feel hopeful. And there's so much right now what takes away our hope. We can't give up hope. We have to be a part of the mighty army of stewards for God's creation, stewards for justice, stewards for peace. Whether we lend our voices or our names or our feet in protest, or I was going to say a hug to the people we care about the most, who we can hug these days in COVID, we have to do something. We are God's stewards of creation. Let us pray.